Today we're going to be looking at the phrase in the Apostles' Creed about he descended into hell. This phrase is by far the most controversial phrase in all of the Apostles' Creed, and some copies of the Apostles' Creed after this phrase have an asterisk explaining the controversy of this phrase, while other versions of the Apostles' Creed actually remove it from the Creed. Lutherans, Catholics, Anglicans, and Orthodox all interpret this phrase to mean that when Jesus died, he physically went to hell, and they use passages not properly, not in the proper exegesis, but they use passages like Ephesians 4, 8, and 10. When he ascended on high, he led a host of captives and he gave gifts to men. In saying he ascended, what does it mean that he also descended into the lower regions? And so they use that verse, Ephesians 4:9, to speak about Jesus descending into hell. They also use 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 18 to 20. And there it says in verse 19, in which he went, that's Jesus, and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. And there they teach that when Jesus died and before he was resurrected, he went to hell to preach to the souls in hell. So these Catholic, Anglican, and Lutheran scholars and attendees of those churches think that Jesus physically spent time from his death till his resurrection in hell. I would argue that those who believe that Jesus went to hell go beyond what the scriptures are saying about where Jesus was after he died on the cross and before his resurrection. Because we have other passages where Jesus says he's in paradise after he dies. This is the famous verse in Luke 23, verses 43, where Jesus is speaking to the thief on the cross who has put his trust in the Lord and acknowledges that Jesus is innocent. Jesus says to him, truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. And I know people try and change the grammar in that. They do what we call syntactical and grammatical gymnastics to that verse. But that, according to the Greek, is how the grammar should read. And we also have Jesus saying in the Gospel of Luke, just before he dies, these are the last words of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke. Before he dies, Jesus says, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And so here we have Jesus committing his spirit to be with the Father. So how can Jesus both be in hell and with the Father in paradise? Now, this debate stems from the definition of the word hell in the Apostles' Creed. And some of the creeds actually translate it, he descended to the dead. But there are two Greek words that are translated as hell. The first is Gehenna. And the word Gehenna in the Greek is the place of divine judgment, punishment, and destruction. And this word is used often in the New Testament. But there's also a word that can be translated as hell. It's the word Sheol. This is the place of the dead. It's not a place of judgment, but a place of pit or a grave. And so the Creed uses this word Sheol, and thus what the Creed is telling us is that Jesus physically died. The death of Jesus was not a fake death. It wasn't made up. He really did die. And he took upon the judgment of God on the cross. But we also know that from Psalm 16 that Jesus wasn't abandoned in Sheol. We have in Psalm 16:10, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol or let your Holy One see corruption. And then we have to look to the sermon in Acts chapter 2, where Peter uses this psalm, Psalm 16 verse 10, to teach that Jesus didn't stay dead. God raised him from the dead. He wasn't abandoned in Sheol. And he says this in Acts chapter 2, verses 29 to 31. Brothers, I may say to you with confidence about the patriarch David that he both died and was buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. Being therefore a prophet, and knowing that God had sworn with an oath to him that he would set one of his descendants on his throne. He foresaw and spoke about the resurrection of Jesus. So here's David prophesying the resurrection of Jesus, that he was not abandoned to Hades or to Sheol, nor did his flesh see corruption, raised from the dead. Although Jesus did die, we can celebrate that death did not hold him down. He did not stay in the grave forever. God raised him from the dead. And that's at the foundation of the Christian faith. The death of Jesus, that he physically died and God raised him from the dead. And that's the very hope of the gospel. That's the hope of Christianity, that Christ died to take away our sins. He bore the judgment of God in place of us so that we could experience forgiveness, be reconciled to God. But Jesus Christ was also raised from the dead, which seals the deal that our sins are forgiven and that we will be brought with Christ to reign with the Lord forever and ever. In conclusion, R.C. Sproul, in his book on the Apostles' Creed, comments on this section of the Apostles' Creed. He said, John Calvin and others saw the descent as a spiritual reality of Jesus' soul, where he hung rejected and condemned by his Father on the cross, to be forsaken, to be cut off from God, brings with it the full torment of hell. And then when it speaks about Jesus descended into Sheol, he bore the judgment of God, he fully died for sinners. Thanks for watching, and God bless.